Good afternoon, friends and neighbors. We're here for yet another iteration of No Filter Media. I'm here with my good friend, Joni Wickham, and we are here to talk to a good friend of ours about what she does and why she does it. But I want to let you know that I am the co-founder of Wickham James Strategies and Solutions along with Joni. I am the author of a couple of books. One is The Opportunity Agenda, A Way to Grow the Middle Class, and the other is
Passion for Purpose. What would you do without me, buddy?
I am having a hard time today. All right. And the other is A Passion for Purpose, Building Cities for Our Children. I want to make sure that you all know that we are always willing to hear from you, and you should contact us at our website at wickhamjames.com. And I'll turn it over to Joni. Joni?
Hey, everybody. Joni Wickham here, also co-founder at Wickham James Strategies and Solutions, and get to work on a variety of client business and projects and initiatives with Sly through Wickham James Strategies and Solutions. Also, the author of the best-selling book, The Thin Line Between Cupcake and Bitch. And we have one of my girl crushes on this episode today. Sly, tell our audience a little bit about Leigh Anne.
Well, you got a girl crush. I got a man crush. Orange crush even, except that sounds like Denver. Leigh Anne Knight is a person for whom I have a great deal of respect. I first met her when she was engaged in raising the educational awareness and the educational attainment of children and kids in this city, something that I have a passion for. I remember very distinctly being in Chicago with Leigh Anne at a conference and running around getting things to eat. But this is a lady who brings a ton of skills to whatever she's involved in. Now she is with the DeBruce Foundation, and we're going to let Leigh Anne tell you what that is and how she does things.
Thank you, Sly, and thank you, Joni. It's fun to be here with two people who I admire, and feel just very privileged to be with you all today and with your audience. So thanks for joining us. And at the DeBruce Foundation, we're located here in Kansas City, Missouri, and we are committed to expanding pathways to economic growth and opportunity. So we're here in Kansas City, but nationally committed to this cause about helping people change the way they pursue careers and thinking about what value they bring into the career marketplace, especially as we know the economy and our workforce continues to change and advance and will into the decades to come.
That's great. So, you have a history in K through 12 education. Talk a little bit about the connection between that space and the workforce projects and initiatives that you work on now at DeBruce.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I have been blessed to spend my life on mission around improving the quality of life for others. And so whether in education, where we're thinking about how to prepare them for the next grade level or on out into the workforce, I've spent time doing that in the field of education. And then as Sly and I, when our paths crossed and we thought about, gosh, we've got to do really good research, use the data that we have to inform practices and policies in education. And that's really where the intersection is with the DeBruce Foundation. So we're about looking at data that matters in terms of helping us, bridge individuals from what they can be and how they can bring value into the workforce and what we need in the economy. And so when we talk about 8 to 10 million people being underemployed or unemployed, and 8 to 10 million jobs out there at any given point in time that we need to fill, that they're skilled jobs and they're mid-skill and upper-skilled jobs. We really have to think about how to build those bridges and get people comfortable, right, with how to walk across those, meeting them where they are and preparing them. So preparing in education and now preparing for the workforce overall.
Well, since I really am grounded in the advocacy for early childhood education, particularly 0 to 5, I'm curious as to your thoughts about whether or not our current education system is actually meeting the demands of the current and future economy. I'm concerned that we spend so much time teaching towards various metrics and tests and scores that we're not producing critical thinkers.
Yeah. So one of the things we like to say at the DeBruce Foundation is that the sooner we start to help individuals understand opportunities that are out there in the careers and the kinds of work activities that they're going to be doing, the better. And so even in that 0 to 5 space, beginning to help individuals understand what they like to do, what they do well, build up through those interests, and getting them exposed to lots of different opportunities, Leigh. So I'm going to be an advocate for we cannot start too soon to do that. And in terms of our educational systems, we're blessed to be here in Kansas City, where as a metropolitan area, businesses, higher education institutions, foundations, and school districts are attempting to work together along with civic efforts to say, what is it that we need to do to make our educational systems the best that they can be? And I think that's really what it's going to take, right? It's not just one sector's job to work on this, but it is about all of us banding together and thinking, there's more that we can do. And in fact, what might have been sufficient decades ago is no longer sufficient and will not be sufficient going into the future. Students have to be prepared differently for what we have coming in the future and what we have now, quite frankly.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. On that note, your organization recently commissioned a study to see how young people are approaching the workforce. Tell us about that study. What'd you find?
Well, some good news out of that study is like 9 out of 10 of those youth are excited about and confident about what will happen in their career future. However, when we look a little bit deeper, 80% of them say that they don't know how to prepare for this future for which they are confident. And 2/3 of them do not know what they want to be in the future in terms of their career. So we have a long on-ramp of opportunity in order to help them be exposed to those kinds of jobs that they can do and understand more about, hey, what do I like to do and where will I bring value into this economy?
Is that issue behind the real world learning experiences that are now becoming more prevalent in schools?
Yeah, kudos to the Kauffman Foundation here in Kansas City and the school districts and the out of school time entities and the businesses who have gotten on board to, in terms of real world learning, that's exactly what it is how do we provide more experiences for students to get to see what this real world of work looks like? And so that's most certainly behind that. And I think that is an example of where we've recognized there's no one entity or no one system that can do this by themselves. This really takes all of us working together to do that.
So the Agile Work Profiler is one of the tools that the DeBruce Foundation has to help individuals kind of navigate that workforce space. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that tool and maybe some of the organizations that you partner with on that.
Sure. The Agile Work Profiler can be found at agilities.org or debruce.org, and it's an online assessment. It just takes you about 10 minutes and surveys you around what do you like to do and what do you do well. And at the end of the day, you get a list of 1 through 10, what we like to call your agilities, but they're work activities that are used in every single job in the economy, just in differing amounts. And that leads us back to individuals understanding, hey, where are my interests? And then how can I start to build this vision for myself and I can grow and develop these agilities. That's one of the things that we as a foundation believe is there's time for us to work with schools and to work with real world learning efforts and those kinds of things for individuals to recognize where they are today, but also recognize I can learn and grow and develop these work activities, which we call agilities.
You know, I went through that assessment and it said that I should be a Chippendale.
I think you need it to hit reboot or refresh or just shut it down.
Well, and one of the ways that it differs from some other career assessments, I mean, this is what traditionally we've done is we've tried to channel people into 1 or 2 or 3 options. So if Chippendales is for you, great. But if that wasn't something that was on your roadmap, you would probably not feel a great deal of confidence or self-worth. And so the point of the Agile Work Profiler is to actually help expand the opportunities, the spectrum of things that young people as well as adults will consider. because it's no longer enough to just think we have to work on the youth with this. It's actually about people all across the age spectrum seeing, oh, something's changing in my sector, in my job. So I also have to be willing to learn new things.
So I'm curious. I'm curious about whether or not, after you crunch the data and you look at it, whether or not you see any deviations based on race, based on socioeconomics, based on gender, based on any of those things that tend to divide us. Do those tend to indicate that there are differences in how people, approach the basic issue and the assessment, but the things that they include in order to find the right path?
Well, one of the things that we're with the survey, what we're trying to do, we've had about 42,000 people take it, and we're starting to work through the analysis to see if there are even differences in rankings of, the agilities for people by those different subgroups, Leigh. So we're just now starting to do that because we've just kind of hit a large enough number to look at that. However, the tool itself was developed on data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And those are people who are actually in those jobs reporting on their work activities. So it's not about one's personality. It's perhaps less about what someone has been exposed to previously, but it's, if you're doing that job today, what are the work activities that you are required to do?
More of an aptitude type of.
So it'll be really interesting to see across time, even, and jobs will change too. The ranked activities of different jobs will change across time because of technologies changing, the way the sectors continue to change, and tools and technical tools that are developed to use. So I think that will be one of the things that we'll get to track across time. We do find that typically with the youth, like we have been able to look at youth in comparison to adults, many times youth are reporting that they like to do things better and they're interested in things where they've had more experiences, right? So they might say something like developing others because maybe they've helped take care of younger siblings, or they've done babysitting jobs and those kinds of things, and would be less likely to report that they have a high level of interest or that they do very well the managing agility because they haven't had experience doing that yet. And that's where you say, now this is where something changes over time.
So what does one do if there is a work activity that perhaps they're good at, they're successful in it, but they're just kind of burnt out of it and they don't enjoy it?
I'm so glad you asked that. When we were first working on developing the instrument, we had a lot of friends and family even trying it before we tested it with larger groups. And I can remember doing it with my father. And he said that he rated very highly something that he does very well. And then when it came to, well, how well do you like doing that? He rated it very low. And I said, Dad, that is so odd. You've done that for so much of your life and you're really good at it. And he goes, that does not mean I like to do it.
Yeah, doesn't mean I want to do it anymore.
Does not mean I want to do it anymore, which that is the beautiful thing about the Agile Work Profiler is it takes into account both this piece of, yeah, you do it well, but do you like to do it? And if you don't like to do it, then maybe you don't want to go to a job where it's an agility that gets used in the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 spot. Maybe it's okay for it to be 6, 7, or 8, but let it move yourself into an opportunity where you can do it if you have to do it, but you don't have to do it as much in that particular job or opportunity.
Yeah, good point. Talk to me a little bit about career literacy. What does that mean?
Yeah, so as we continue to move into helping bridge this gap between those who are underemployed or unemployed, or just hitting the workforce, as well as the jobs that we have out there, it is very important for individuals to understand who they are, what they like to do, what they do well, what opportunities are out there, and how to search for opportunities that they haven't necessarily thought about previously. So career literacy takes those 3 things into account, as well as just kind of painting this future vision for yourself that you can grow and develop and that you can try and do new things. And so career literacy, it is important. And Sly, your question earlier about Are schools doing all that they can do? Are learning institutions doing everything that they can do to help with this? This is not something radical that we need to help increase an understanding of career opportunities for youth. But what is radical is probably the ways that we're going to need to do that for that to be effective. And so for career literacy to be effective, we actually really need to be pouring more into them seeing these opportunities, having these hands-on experiences with these, and every single day building their self-worth around what do they like to do and what do they do well. And that's maybe a more of a radical shift, because it's been like, okay, you do this, we're going to put you into this kind of slot, and then you'll be able to do that for the rest of your life. And that is not what is going to be the case for these youth.
You know, I'm concerned a little bit because my thought, which may or may not be accurate, is that socioeconomics plays a major role. And by that, I simply mean that if you live in a world where there are professionals and workers and all sorts of people passing through your house and your life, and you live in a world where none of that's happening and everybody is a laborer, that your ideas about careers may be skewed, which is one of the reasons I believe that we ought to be exposing kids to every opportunity that we can as early as middle school, not just high school, but middle school.
Yes.
I remember when my son was in a Montessori school as a little kid, and he came home one day all excited and told me that he wanted to be a carrot cutter because in school they had cut carrots, and he had a blast cutting carrots. So that became a career goal for him. And he said if that didn't work, he wanted to be a professional football player. So I said, you can do both. There's an off season. You can cut carrots in the off season, play football during the season. But to the extent that a child from birth living in their home is exposed to various careers, I think that it either expands their idea about what's available to them, what's possible, or limits their idea about what's available and what's possible.
Yes.
What do you think?
So there's a couple of things that I think you're teeing into there. Number one, relevancy comes along as I start to understand, oh, that's what I'm going to have to do in that job. Oh, that's why it's important for me to learn that. But the other piece in your socioeconomic question is about relationships. And so if we do not assist individuals in expanding their networks and those network resources and widening those and deepening those and diversifying those individuals will not see those kinds folks who look like them and are in those jobs and think, oh, I can be that. I can do that. So it is both about the relationships that we develop outside of the school and outside of our neighborhoods, diversifying that and expanding that, as well as building up their confidence and having them being able to practice those skills that will be used in that job and seeing the relevance too.
Right.
I'll have to do that someday, so I better learn how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
If only I had understood when I was 14 the relevancy of Algebra 2.
I think you need to go back and start at the beginning. Basic math would have been great.
Yeah. I was trying to help my third grader with math homework a couple weeks ago, and she's like, never mind. I'm going to Dad.
I never envisioned myself as being part of a partnership where I was the one who had better math skills than anybody.
I know. But to Leigh Anne's point, at least I know where my agilities are and where they are not. I don't even like math, so there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and it won't surprise you that a lot of times youth go right to the same thing that sometimes adults do is how much money am I going to make in that job? You know?
Yeah.
Wrong approach.
Yeah. And that part of it, and yet this pandemic has taught us some interesting things about that, right? And I think it'll be really interesting to see if or how some of that changes as it relates to how fulfilled one can be in the role that they are and willingness for people to complement one another's skill sets like the two of you do, here and in your previous careers together.
Right.
Yeah. What is a side effect of COVID that you think is probably here to stay when it comes to the workforce and to how the workforce has changed because of the pandemic?
So obviously one of the most prevalent ones is just the amount of time that people spend in an office with other individuals and the communication modes that we now need to be adept at using. So we all need to be able to Zoom, do conference calls, as well as work with individuals. And probably one of my biggest fear factors for the students who have lost 2 years in some cases of being in close proximity with individuals, working on their everyday communication skills, their in-person skills. I think that we're going to feel those effects for quite a while. And I think, and even yesterday, somebody was with me and they said, we have to get used to all of us being back in a room and being that close together, right? And so I think that is, even that, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes just the majority of us to feel comfortable in those settings. But you think about being, a seventh grader and that happening. You think about being a second grader and that happening, and, how much we may need to continue to work on even communication skills that are face to face, not just over Zoom or not just by phone calls.
We didn't need anything else to slow down socialization.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got enough of that already with Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Drop Dead and all the other stuff that's out there. But now we're almost institutionalizing it in some respects. When people found out that you do not have to be in the same room to have a meeting, I can be on my screen in my bathroom and you can be on your screen in your kitchen, it's now become almost the preferred method in a lot of ways. There'll probably be a pendulum swing back the other way to some extent, because I think it's a very hard habit to break when you've spent a long time in office settings, etc. But I'm concerned that the pandemic, other than the political divisions, has created social distance, not necessarily divisions, but distance. And when you're distant, you don't empathize as much as you normally would, which makes things a lot colder. That's my concern. But then you've got the kids who are already way behind are now way, way, way behind and may never catch up. And that's scary.
It is.
It's not like we have a surplus of kids out there ready to enter the workforce over the next 20 years.
No, the parents are absolutely sending us the best ones they have. And it is our jobs as educators and others to, to work and to meet them where they are. Right. And I think that's going to be part of the key to this, is to trying to understand, where are they as individuals? How do we meet them? And we're all learning, right? We're all adjusting and learning. McKinsey dropped some research about a year into the pandemic about the things that will probably remain remote, and the kinds of things where it's like, okay, we're going to probably be back in a room to do that. So that's an interesting report, but I think it would be really interesting to see the kinds of ways that schools have changed too, and the kinds of ways that, and it may be that out of school programs that were already very important to bolstering what's happening in schools, it may be that those out of school programs continue to become even more and more important to do that, because that's where kids are interacting and doing a lot of those activities too. Right. Haven't you seen it as we've dealt with snow days? I'm like, how confusing is it now to be a parent with snow days? Because are we remote? Are we on snow? And how confusing would it be to be an educator and have to decide, are we going remote? How many of my kids have access to technology at this point in time and being able to do that? And so I think we still have a lot of lessons to learn. And I think that we're all going to have to be mindful of what has happened across the last 2 years and how we continue to monitor and adjust and meet folks where they are. Teachers too, educators across the board.
Yeah. Except, the thing that's really kind of sad is that the stresses and strains on an already stressed and strained system, i.e. teachers, is going to be felt for a long time, because they weren't being paid nearly what they should have been. Then they were asked to do things that they weren't supposed to be doing. Then they were asked to do things they weren't trained to do. And then they had to deal with everybody else's stress regarding health and keeping up in terms of grades and homework and things like that remotely. And a lot of teachers have decided that, I can make a lot more money as a bus driver and not have the stress, or I can do whatever. I can start my own shop, or whatever the case may be. So we're losing teachers. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what is going to change that to the extent that we have more people wanting to come in and teach and doing it well. What's going to be that incentive?
Gosh, I wish I knew the answer to that, Sly, because I do think that as old as the teaching profession is, it has attracted individuals because they wanted to come and make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the system will have to continue to help teachers and others recognize the way that this is a profession where you literally go to school every single day and you do make a difference in a person's life. And so that enticement, I don't know. I don't know if that will, I think we would probably say the same thing about clergy. I think we could probably, we see it also in healthcare. And so there will be a variety of professions that are those serving and caring professions that have been taxed to a greater degree. If I were in a school, I think I would be being very, I would put a lot of intentionality around support networks for those teachers, support networks for those educators, the principals too, the superintendents too. And kudos to the folks here in Kansas City and other parts of the nation where they are establishing coalitions, or they're using those relationships and leveraging those and saying, we as a group of superintendents need to be talking together about what we're doing in this space. We as a group need to be supporting our teachers and supporting our principals in this. And I do think that we need to be thinking about how we serve and care for those individuals who are serving and caring for that population of youth that are our future.
Well, for another segment, another thing that would help is if parents would stop being crazy. Okay,
that would help a lot of things in the world.
Well, when parents are burning books or banning books and getting in teachers' faces about what they said in one class or another, or some of the crazy things that are going on, it's kind of like, look, I'm here serving, trying to make your child the best they possibly can be with the tools that I've been given. And you're here protesting because you don't want them to learn about critical race theory, whatever the hell that is, or LGBT subjects, or anything other than what you want them to know. So why don't you just homeschool them?
Sly, I wondered how long it would take us to get to this in the podcast this time.
I'm surprised it took that long.
I know, I am too, as we talk about reading and the importance of that and what that means for our democracy, for individuals to be able to have access to all kinds of literature and to be able to be nurtured and mentored along the way, and to respect the diversity of thought that is presented to young people by the way of books, not just by the way of those who are in my immediate surroundings. And yet, I'll play the parent side of that too. And I'll think about when I was an assistant principal, one of the best pieces of advice that somebody said to me was, remember, this is about getting a win-win. And you're sitting across the table from the parent who cares a whole lot about what's best for their kid, and they think that they know what that is. And you're sitting there as an educator or a principal, and you care about what's in the best interest of that kid. But those two positions may not be the same. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you know who we all need to be paying attention to in that room?
The kid.
The kid. Mm-hmm. The kid. So it's similar whether you're, step parenting with someone, whether you are, individuals who you're working with in the workforce and you're managing teams, like, okay, wait, what's the one thing we all need to be focused on in this? We need to be focused on that individual who we're attempting to help. We need to be focused on that young person who we're attempting to teach. And I've always found there's kind of this magical thing is out of the mouths of babes. And I'm like, really, a lot of times you can ask the kid what they think about that. And what do we need to do in a democratic society? We need for individuals and citizens to be able to think and to speak for themselves. And we cannot start training and working on that too early, in my opinion. So student voice, youth voice really matters. So when schools and parents are at odds about things, I would absolutely say, well, let's get the youth involved and let's also hear their voice.
Amen.
Yeah, it's great training for their future.
They're the customers.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So to wrap up today, it is March, Women's History Month, and you are such a connector and such a tremendous advocate for other women. Why do you think it's important, considering your background in education and what you do now at the DeBruce, why do you think it's so important to support women in the workforce?
Well, I have been blessed throughout my lifetime with men who have been allies and women who have been amazing role models. And I think it's important for all of us to give back into that space. And I do believe that our economy thrives when we're all thriving and finding those opportunities into things from like the Appointments Project that you guys have been involved with United We, and other kinds of places where we have women in leadership roles, women in, and I consider leadership capacity to be across organizations. So I think that that is important. But again, it's much like the youth. It takes all of us to get behind individuals and to trust, also to be curious, to ask questions. What's your viewpoint on this? What do you think about this? And to really help individuals. I don't know, Joni, that I answered your question. My apologies.
No, I think you did.
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
I do want to point out that there's some anomalies about these months. First of all, Women's History Month has 31 days. Black History Month has 28.
That is true.
I think they put them both at the beginning of the year so that they could kind of get through it before baseball season.
Well, we're thankful in Kansas City that baseball season is actually happening now, right? So,
Well, Leigh Anne, thank you so much for taking time to come chat with us today.
Yeah,
we love what you have going on at the DeBruce Foundation and your whole team, and just appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.
thank you.
Always good to see you.
Good to
It's
see
a
you
little
too.
too warm for your boots that I love, but you might want to put those in the Smithsonian or something. Those are pretty neat boots.
Well, I tried to wear the right footwear too, but you're right. It's not a boot day in Kansas City.
You've always got on some funky shoes, kid. I love them. So, want to make sure that everybody knows that this is just another one of our broadcasts and podcasts, and that you should feel free to reach out to us. Let us know what you think anytime. This is Sly James and Joni Wickham and No Filter Media. Thanking you, Leigh Anne,
Thank you, Sly.
for
Thanks,
coming and
Joni.
talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.